I want to tell you about today's sponsor, which is AIbox. AIbox is my own personal software company I'm currently working on, and today we have officially launched a crowdfunding campaign over on Republic. AIbox is essentially a no-code AI app builder and marketplace, so you can chain together any AI models, put in your own custom prompts, and automate your workflows. Then you have two options: either keep it private for yourself or your organization, or publish it to the marketplace. If you publish it to the marketplace, you then receive royalties anytime someone uses it. If you're interested in investing in AIbox, you can go to republic.com/AI-box or Google Republic AIbox. You can see more on our website as well with links to all the information, aibox.ai. I've worked out a special deal with Republic where, just for essentially podcast listeners that I'm telling about this today, for the first $250,000, we have a discounted $8.5 million valuation. After that, the valuation is $10 million. So if you're interested in this, I would definitely go check that out because we're over $150,000 and we've just launched this today. We're raising up to $1.2 million, but we're really, really excited where this goes and excited to help you automate your workflows and bring AI to the masses with AIbox.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the AI Applied Podcast. This is your host, Connor Grennan.
And I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. Every week, we break down the latest in AI news. We interview experts in the field, and we talk about some incredible tools, studies, use cases that you can use to apply AI into your business, workflow, and career. We had to do an emergency podcast episode today. I'm not going to lie. Connor and I didn't have this scheduled, but the news was so crazy over the weekend. Of course, why is OpenAI got to do us dirty like that and drop all this stuff over the weekend? But Connor was like, dude, we got to get on this. So we're going to be talking about some incredible AI news. Connor, why don't you cue us up and tell us the stories we're going to be covering today?
Jaden, first of all, on OpenAI, what is it about them dropping announcements without telling people they're going to drop announcements? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how they play it so cool. Like, I announce everything in advance. Anyway, let's just jump right in. So OpenAI just super sneakily over the weekend was like, hey, we're going to start integrating all of your ChatGPT 4 tools if you have a pro account into one chat. So essentially what that means, if you have a pro account, and by the way, again, if you don't, Jaden and I are still waiting for how you are spending that magical $20 that you are spending a month that is not using it on this. But what we're finding here is that this is such a huge story because if you know how ChatGPT 4 Pro account works, the subscription account, you have like a drop-down menu. And in that drop-down menu, it has all these incredible tools in and of themselves would be amazing stories, right? So you have the default, obviously, with ChatGPT 4. You obviously have Browse with Bing. You have what used to be called Code Interpreter, Advanced Data Analytics, where you can just, sort of chuck big spreadsheets in there. You have plugins, and I know there's like 1,500 plugins, but the big ones are like, Chat PDF and things like that. You have the DALL-E, image generator. You just have all this stuff. And what it's saying is that we're going to integrate that. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because what you used to have to do was sort of choose which one of these frames you wanted to use. So if you wanted to do image generation, you could do that. But what you couldn't do is also say, well, and here, can you also analyze this or use vision? But if you want to use vision, you couldn't also use the browser. It was just sort of tricky, right? So now with them all together, it feels like, the old like Voltron, like all these things coming together and forming one massive beast. That's what it feels like. Jaden, what was your take on this?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like it had so many interesting use cases and now they're all getting merged. I wonder if they're going to do something similar. We're going to see like another you're going to get another emergency podcast when I think they do the same thing with the plugins, because right now when you use ChatGPT, it's like you enable one specific plugin or a couple to work, but you only have a certain amount. I think I see no reason why they don't at some point just have it where if you have the plugin installed, in your prompt, you can say search Expedia for X, Y, and Z, or just search for the best flight thing, and whatever plugins you have, it's going to use those plugins. You don't have to go and manually tell it which things to use, right? Like on Google, when you ask it a question, you don't say search Google for the best flights from Expedia and Hotwire. You just say give me the best flights, and it figures it out. And I think OpenAI is going to do the same thing. So you'll see a whole nother emergency podcast there. This is big though, because I was just recently, of course, I have my startup AIbox, which is a no-code AI drag and drop platform. And I was like, I wonder if ChatGPT with this new DALL-E features could help me design a cleaner homepage. I'm like a sucker for design. I've spent like weeks on elements on this homepage. So, I'm definitely like, I go overboard on this, but I'm always like, how can I make it better? So I went and I took a screenshot of the homepage of the AI Box Marketplace, put it into OpenAI and said like, hey, tell me, like, give me a list of things I can improve in this design. And I think this is very applicable for literally anything, whatever your job is. If you're working on PowerPoints, if you're working on websites, if you're working on, sales pages, if you're working on like any sort of graphics or visuals, this is so applicable. UX, UI, all that stuff. So I was like, hey, give me a list, and it gave me a list of things to make it better. And then I had to open a separate chat and enable Dolly and say, hey, I have a website that does X, Y, and Z, a marketplace that does all these things. Here's a list that I would like you to include to make like this better and make a design. And it made a design. And I'll be honest, the design was actually cool. And I was like, oh, dang, I love how it like designed like the headers on this. That's so much cleaner than what I thought. It had some good ideas, but this is going to be taken absolutely to the next level. If you merge those two things together, now I just give it the image and say, here's the image, design a better version. I don't have to go copy and paste in between, because I think it loses context when you copy and paste in between, because all it had was the text description. Couldn't actually visually see what I had. Now it's going to be able to like base it right off of that image, create new designs, create new PowerPoints. This is really big as far as getting the outputs to be like 5-10 times higher quality.
Yeah, it's huge, right? And it's that integration. By the way, we should caveat by saying like, oh, this was such a pain in the butt that I had to move this. I mean, it's sort of like complaining about, I think somebody was saying complaining about like, like the noise of the baby kicking your seat when you're flying through the air at 500 miles an hour. But okay, that's caveated. What this can do now is really unbelievable. The use cases, by the way, this is only getting rolled out now. I did sort of like try to get sneaky access from somebody I knew. They're like, oh man, can't you help with that? I can't help with that. But it will roll out. So if you don't have it right now, just give it some time. But here's the thing, right? Especially when you're combining, one of the big use cases I saw, I want to kind of piggyback off your image thing, is if you take a photo of something, trying to describe something is really, really complicated when you're trying to do image generation. And now with vision, I'm using vision all the time. I'm taking a photo of everything. Again, if something's wrong on my laptop, it's like, an error message. I take a photo. It's like, oh, it's like having your eyes instead of trying to describe what's going wrong. But the way that this works with DALL-E now that Vision and DALL-E are integrated, or are about to be integrated, is like, hey, this is the kind of thing I'm trying to do. And you take a photo of something you're trying to kind of get across, a theme or something like that, or maybe somebody has a style that you love, or something like a website or something. And you take that, and then that can actually create the image generation based on that, rather than you trying to do the perfect prompt. And Jaden, I think that actually is also sort of like getting us away. And I think the evolution here, I train companies on this, and I never teach prompt engineering because I think we're getting away from it. When you have vision, you don't need the perfect prompt. And that's what feels like so powerful to me as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, 100% agree. I think we've been here with text, but we're taking it to a new level now that we can integrate natural language processing into this concept of image. And I'll give you an example of that. But I also just want to bring up that the next step will be audio and then video that OpenAI will inevitably roll out. They're already kind of doing some stuff in here. They got the voice, some voice stuff. So it's going to be interesting. But here's what I think is interesting. Text already, like for me, if I had to go write like a newsletter or something, what I would do is I would go and find like, 5 articles that talked about the content I wanted to talk about that are really interesting. I'd consolidate them. I'd throw them all into ChatGPT or Claude if the context window was too big because I had too much data. So I'd do this with Claude too. Throw them all in there, say, hey, write a newsletter or write a blog post or write an article about like all of the articles below, consolidate them to the most important pieces of information, do it in this style, also include the fact that today this and this and this were announced, and do it in context of like my audience cares about, they're like business professionals that do X, Y, and Z, right? So you throw all that in there with text, and then boom, it blasts you out like a perfect article. You go tweak it, bada boom, bada bing, bada boom. You have an amazing piece of content you can post, reuse for whatever. We did that with text for a while. Now, I think with these new integrations, it's going to move to image. So you do the same thing where you could upload like pictures and say, based off of these 4 pictures, like create X, Y, and Z photo. Like based off of these 5 photos of people, make a family photo with all of them in there, put this as the background, do this. So it's like, we're doing this like this combo that used to be able to do with text. It was not possible with image. Now we're starting to do it with image because they've integrated it into natural language processing and ChatGPT. And that is going to be incredible. But the reason why I think it's really amazing, of course, that like perfect image that you throw all these pieces together is like cool. I think it's amazing because video is like the golden, I don't know. It's like the thing that's incredibly hard to achieve. And you need all of these pieces in order to make the video good. Because think about it. Right now, we're doing the image. Next probably will be audio. Then the next step is to say, okay, make a video about X, Y, and Z. Here's 5 images. These are going to be the characters in the video. Here is, I want you to have like the audio sound of waves crashing and a seagull in the background, and it's at the beach. Like, you tell it all of these pieces, you give it all of this data, and it compiles exactly what you want. And so, yeah, for me, as they're starting to piece all of this together in ChatGPT, I'm so excited because I see like this is very quickly evolving towards incredible images, then incredible video. And it's really taking this to the next level.
It's just wild, and Runway is kind of starting to get there a little bit. But you're right, like all these all these video tools are really just a combination of the images that you're already doing. It's just sort of like hard right now in Midjourney and everything else to kind of keep a consistent style. But I'm sure in the background they're probably already doing it. There's a few tools that do that. And also, you were saying before about like Expedia and things like that. I just remember that yesterday I was, we're looking at taking a trip to London, right? So I was like, okay, so when does the Eurostar go? And I'm like, well, I wonder if ChatGPT would know that. So in the past, it would be like, oh, September 2021. But now, I sort of like click on the browser thing. And it actually, I thought it was just going to give me really generic stuff, but it actually gave me updated to that date, like today's date. I think it was yesterday, whatever it was, that date of when the train was, the Eurostar is the train that goes from London to Paris, the high-speed train. And it was actually giving me updated scheduling. Now, it couldn't grab it like, 2 months, ahead of time or whenever we're kind of might be thinking about going or something like that. But even the fact that it was going in there and reading it. And my take was really that plugins might start to go away, because one of the big things is that this, ChatGPT used to just be able to, pull in, I don't know, CSV files, things like that. And now it's pulling in PDFs, which everybody's going crazy about because all the Chat PDF, all the Ask My PDF, all these add-ons, it's like the death of the AI startup. That might be a little premature, but it's not premature. And so now I'm thinking the same thing about plugins. Like I used to just use plugins for a few things, right? Like a PDF reader, maybe Wolfram Alpha, maybe sort of a web browser, like Web Pilot or one of those. And now it's just all getting integrated. So I'm wondering if, the plugins are just going to get super specific around things, or they're just, Sam Altman has never been big on plugins to begin with. So I'm just wondering like the future of plugins and just how they streamline all of this too,
Okay, wait. Well, something I'd love to ask you. You said Sam Altman's never been big on plugins. Is that just based off stuff you've seen, or like have you seen him specifically say that? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, so I'm interpreting it a little bit, but probably like when plugins came out first, Altman was like, he's not sure there's a good product market fit, right? So I think what he thought was that obviously the audience, which is how they're going to do their P&L, wanted to open ChatGPT and to have Kayak in there and Avis rental car in there and the web, everything like that in there. And what he started to find, especially because they got off to a slow start, but he was saying that, and this was maybe not a direct quote, but I really recall it. He's like, there might not be a great product market fit with plugins, because what it really seems like Sam Altman was saying is that people want GPT, let's say GPT-4, even 3.5 in their experience. So, right. So, I mean, we can do a whole episode on Canva, everything else, which is just, these incredible tools. But all these tools now have AI built in. And I think what he's saying is that it feels like people want to go in there. And that's my theory on why they haven't really built out plugins and they're just sort of sitting there. Because if you ever go in there, it's like 2,000 of them. And it's like, what's the next Filipino earthquake going to be? It's just the most random things. And there's like 6 that are good. And it feels like they would have done more of that. But I think what Sam Altman was saying was like, he's like, I'm just not sure this is the direction we want to go in for the long run.
Yeah, no, okay. So what's interesting is, I mean, when plugins launched, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be game changing. And the way it was rolled out, I was like, especially the fact that you have to download a plugin and check the box to use it. And I'm like, I don't want to check the box when I I don't even know what plugin I should use for half of my queries. Like,
again, first world problems, Jade. You don't want to listen to ourselves, but anyway, keep going. You don't want to check a box. Go on. I hear you though. I hear you.
And so I think, I definitely think there's ways they could have rolled it out better, but I think you're right. And here's my theory on why plugins are important, regardless of if they become obsolete, right? Because let's say ChatGPT just starts doing everything. It can crawl the web. So what does it really need plugins for except for API access to specific data sets that are like paywalled? Like, let's say you get and also they're not like, there's no way to monetize them. I was talking to someone recently that makes ChatGPT plugins, and he was like, yeah, they literally have no way for us to monetize these plugins. They have a policy on no monetization. He's like, but like Expedia obviously is sending you to their website to like pay, but they're like blocking other people. So he's like, it's just ridiculous. And
Oh,
we obviously
wow.
have to pay to develop them. So I think there's some serious issues with the plugins. But the reason, this is my theory. Here's my conspiracy theory.
Go.
OpenAI said, we're doing plugins. They go tell all the big companies, we're doing plugins, build your plugin, get it on here. You're going to be the cool kid in the exclusive like group that's getting these in. We're going to tell you about it early, because all of these big companies, Expedia, Kayak, all the big players that are making plugins are like, oh, we're friends with OpenAI. We got the special invite to the program, because guess what? They're just going to scrape your website and give that data anyways. So it's like, if they just did that without doing the plugin things, I could see an uproar from a lot of the big players that are like, no, block OpenAI. We're going to do like the crawl bot block so that they can't get our data. You're going to have to come to our website if you want us. There'd be this defensive push. But all of a sudden, when it's like they got the exclusive invite to the plugins, they're like, no, we're friends.
I love that.
That's
I love it.
my
I love it.
theory on
No, it's fantastic. It's
optics.
fantastic. And I think, yeah, I think you may actually be onto something like that, because OpenAI is all about relationships, as we've seen with the US government, which is why it's so interesting what was also happening with the White House and everything like that, right?
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of which, Connor, we got to break into this. This is absolutely crazy what's happening today. Give us an overview from your standpoint. The White House, President Biden just released an executive order specifically addressing AI and AI safety. Give us a rundown on what you've seen from that.
Yeah, so I think some news outlets were starting to break it early. I don't think they got it exactly right. And so, they've been talking a long time about an executive order from the White House. A lot of people have been calling for this, everything like that. And so I'll read a little bit of it, just like the pertinent points. I want your
Yeah.
feedback on this, Jaden, and kind of like if you think it doesn't go far enough, or if it goes too far, or if it's ridiculous. What I think we should say right at the outset, I think it's really easy, especially on podcasts where you're trying to rip the country apart. It's like, this is so dumb. What idiots in the White House. Look, the White House, I don't care what political side you're on. The White House isn't filled with idiots, okay? Like, they know what they're doing. They're doing these things for a very specific reason, whether it's political or whether they think they can get by with it. But I promise you that they at least have access to very, very smart people. So I like to read it with that rather than just sort of try to discount it, right? So, so this does, like an executive order actually does have a force, the force of law behind it. So I think that's actually really, really important. And, it's not overnight. It's probably like 90 days. But here's the thing. So there's 8 points, right? So they broke it down to 8 things. So I'll just kind of like breeze through these real quick. Like 1, creating new safety and security standards for AI, including requiring some AI companies to share safety test results with the federal government. There's more, but I think that's a huge one, right? Like, it's the black box problem, right? 2, protecting consumer privacy, guidelines that evaluate privacy techniques. Of course, another one, kind of same kind of thing, privacy, black box, what's happening here. Advancing equity and civil rights. This came up pretty high in it, trying to avoid algorithms that further discrimination, especially in the justice system. That's kind of interesting. I think 4, protecting consumers overall. 5, supporting workers by producing a report on the labor market implications. That feels like just dumb to me. Sorry, I said I wouldn't say that. Anyway, disregard my commentary. Promoting innovation and competition by expanding grants for AI research in areas like climate change and modernizing. Jade, I want your feedback because I have so many things. Okay, working with international partners, whatever. Developing guidance for agencies' use of procurement of AI, and speed up the government hiring of workers. And let me just say one other thing is that they also are doing a big push with like, hey, how do we get more AI people hiring? They have a whole AI.gov. But on those 8, what kind of grabs your attention on those?
Here's my overall opinion on all of this is, we obviously, AI regulation is going to happen whether people like it or not. Like, it's inevitable, it's coming. And I think to some degree, AI is going to have such a massive impact. We definitely want there to be some sort of oversight. The first things that you mentioned of, privacy and what was that? What was the first one?
It was like the black box, it's sort of like what goes into the models.
Yes. Okay. The red teaming thing, right?
Yeah,
So
the red teaming,
the safety testing, those ones, I think, very non-controversial, right? Like, at the end of the day, even if it wasn't the government regulating it, like, so it'd be sweet. It would be awesome if these companies just like transparently told all their users, here's all of our like safety stuff we've done, here's like anything we've put into it, here's what we're doing with your data. That should be, but if they're not doing that transparently, I think it's not very controversial for the government to mandate that, because people just like, we have consumer privacy laws, and honestly a lot of it probably ties into stuff that already exists, but this is just like kind of solidifying it. I think, look, I think we're giving the right signal by saying here's an executive order, we're thinking about AI, we're putting forward legislation and thought on it. I think the criticism that a lot of this gets is like over regulating too early, something that Europe is accused of a lot, is because they're the first people that rolled this kind of stuff out. And, some people say, well, hey, look, if you over regulate at the beginning, you're going to stifle innovation. I also have heard the argument, though, that additional regulation helps to spur innovation, because if I'm a big investment fund with $100 million to put into AI companies, and there's like these 4 AI companies that are like helping generate images, but I don't know what the copyright issues are, and I don't know what the privacy issues are, and like I don't know, it's a lot scarier to put the 100 million in. But if they're like, no, there's regulation that explicitly says they can do these 3 things in these 3 ways, and these companies are all in compliance with that, then it's like, okay, great, here's the money, go take this and innovate more. So I've seen both sides of that story, to spur innovation and stop innovation, and I know there's arguments on both sides of it. I tend to believe that this is the right optics to say, look, we're thinking about this, we're putting forth an executive order, and like you're right, it's easy to criticize, and also I'm going to say they're not going to get everything right. Like
Right.
this isn't going to be perfect. Like people will criticize it, and there's probably good reasons to criticize it. But I think we're moving in the right direction. So like I'll say overall, I'm optimistic that we're moving in the right direction.
I think so too. I mean, I think it has just enough in there. I think obviously some of these are a little more like political bend or something, and probably,
Yeah.
people, they're probably catering to a certain extent. Whichever side would be slightly catering to their base, somewhat. Everything else, all politics is politics, right? And this
Yeah.
is politics. And my question would probably be around, how do they implement? How do they enforce? To me, it's also just a huge play of, can we keep everybody happy about this? Do you know what I mean? Like, because I
Mhm.
think we really learned our lesson with social media and everything else. And as we saw Sam Altman going on these sort of like, tours and stuff like that, and all the big players. I mean, Elon Musk is more controversial, but the big players in this seem to be generally well liked by Congress and the American people. I think there's not a ton of like the existential risk conversation has died down a lot, I think, since, let's say, February or March. I just feel like they're going at least in the right direction. I mean, I don't know what we expect them to do, but certainly like this doesn't seem like it's going to stifle anything.
Yeah, for sure. That's my main takeaway here. And like we can argue the 8 points or whatever that they have out there. There's definitely political stuff in there that a lot of people will find controversial or disagree with. But I think overall, it's like the legislation. It's not like shutting everything down, and it's actually gotten criticism for that, because some people are like, "Well, how do you even enforce it? This is more just like here's some good, helpful guidelines." It's like, in my opinion, at this phase, helpful guidelines are great. I do not want them like clamping down hard and forcing everyone to submit really intensive reports that are going to shut down all the new startups. Like give us the helpful guidelines, let people argue and debate about that, see what sticks is the other thing, right? Because maybe Congress gets up in arms and creates bills that are at odds with some aspects of this. So put out the guidelines, see what sticks. We'll have debates about it. It's going to go through Congress. There'll be more legislation. But I think we're moving in the right direction by saying we're thinking about it. We're not clamping down with an iron fist in similar ways China is like mandating the data that can go into the AI models. And so I think in that regard, like I'm fairly happy with kind of the direction of that.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's again, I think Europe was having a hard time with it. I think Europe tends to, I don't want to say they overregulate, but they're just caution. They
Yeah.
overregulate compared to the United States, and I think that this does strike that balance. And then I think that generally these companies, especially the OpenAI's, Anthropics, and Google's and Microsoft's, I think they're going to want to keep the populace on their good side. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it just takes sort of a few things going radically wrong to really turn people against these kinds of things. And I think that, this feels like, again, this balance of people being like, hey, let's all work together, and nothing's gone wrong yet. And so I think we're probably in a good space.
Yeah, 100%. And I think companies are very optimistic right now. Kind of transitioning to the other piece of news I wanted to cover is the fact that Anthropic has just announced that Google is going to be potentially investing $2 billion into it. So obviously the Googles, the Anthropics, these big companies, they're quite optimistic. This doesn't look like this regulation that's coming out of the White House, these executive orders are slowing it down. To the contrary, it seems like people are still very optimistic. What do you make of the $2 billion Anthropic investment?
So this is fascinating to me because it just feels, maybe there's a lot of other things in sort of throughout the industrial history of our world that this has happened a lot. But I just think it's fascinating how these giant rivals are all investing in the same thing, right? And I mean, you could say like, oh, they're hedging their bets and all that kind of stuff. I get that, but like, I don't know. I mean, it's what's so interesting to me is the why factor, right? Because I don't think that Google is going all in, or Microsoft would invest in this because they don't think that their product is going to do well. Like I think Google's coming out with their own mega model and everything like that. The only thing I can think, and Jane, tell me what you think about this. It almost feels, and I don't want to say exclusively, but it really feels like a cloud play as much as anything else, right? I mean, like when a lot of these companies making tons of the AWS, Azure, like Google Cloud, like that is where so much money is, and how much compute and all these things use. And if all of a sudden Anthropic, which I think is used by, isn't it used? I probably have notes on this somewhere, but isn't it used by like Zoom and Salesforce and like really
It's pretty
huge
much the most
players?
integrated after OpenAI. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, right. So I mean, so I guess I'm just thinking like it's not so much about that as like, hey, we're investing, but I wonder if there's a caveat of like using our cloud in the background or something like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at this too limited.
No, you're spot on there. I think there's two parts of the story. The first one is Google doesn't want to be left behind. Of course, they have the most money, but like they're seeing OpenAI to a large extent run away from them on Bard. Like it definitely kind of beat them there. And as much as Bard will try to catch up, like at the end of the day, I just use ChatGPT. I'm familiar with it. I like it. I have the habit now. So they were the first out. They're kind of the winners in my books there. I do use Anthropic and Claude for other different things. So in any case, I think they're all the big players are hedging their bets by getting in. They're like, we have billions and we have the resources, but just in case it doesn't take off, like we need a piece of the ones that we already know are going to kind of be the big winners, so we don't get left behind. So I think there's a hedging their bets definitely is an aspect of it. And then of course it's the cloud component. So at the beginning of the year, Google Cloud invested $300 million into Anthropic.
Right.
And I feel like I wonder like what their thinking is on it, because the concept was like, hey, Anthropic's going to Google Cloud. And then like a month or two ago, we saw AWS say, okay, we're going to do a $4 billion deal. And they didn't give them $4 billion cash. It was like, I think $1 billion up front, and then the rest kind of unlocked with different milestones. But their understanding there was, okay, you're coming over to AWS. And now Google's like, oh, whoa, wait. Like you thought that, you thought that they were up in the game with $4 billion. Like, don't worry, we got $2 billion of our own we could do over here. And I wonder, Anthropic is funny because it seems like it's just kind of bouncing back and forth. This is one piece of commentary I've heard on this whole deal, though, is that unlike a lot of other AI companies, Anthropic is big enough and has raised enough that it's not like, okay, we're doing a round of funding. Who's like 10 people that want to put money in? They literally, they just go to one partner. They go to Google Cloud, 300 million. Thank you. They go to AWS, 4 billion. Thank you. They go to Google, 2 billion. Thank you. And so it's like they're hitting the enterprise. And I think that's a very interesting funding strategy across the market. What I've seen is like VCs more or less are struggling, to say the least, from the last market of turmoil. And where the money that's getting dumped into AI companies, it's into ones that are kind of leading. Like the big money is going into companies that were already leading, and it's coming from big enterprise corporations. It's like that's who's putting the most money in. When you hear about these big checks, it's coming from big corporations. It's not coming from big venture capital firms. I mean, some of them will play in there, but like honestly, that's where the big ones are coming from. And that is such a big kind of department from what we saw over the last number of years before kind of the correction in software.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And first of all, I wonder sort of like at the valuation way back when Google put in 300 million, I wonder what that valuation, what I mean? Because that was a very different valuation of Anthropic back then. So that's one interesting point. And the other thing, listen, this is AI applied, right? So when you look at these things and you're thinking, okay, what else is out there besides ChatGPT? You don't have to go out and try everything. But if you're looking and you're seeing that everybody's dumping money into Anthropic, take that seriously. Like go into Claude. Claude is phenomenal at really huge, with a really huge context window. So if ChatGPT is getting you frustrated, Claude just allows you to just dump in giant things. So test that out. Again, we don't want to sort of like give you just tons of tools, but when you see this news, you're like, what does that tell you? That tells you that this is a big player. And that's what I would sort of like look at as well.
Yeah, I 100%. I think you're spot on there, Connor. It's like follow the money, because it's very easy to criticize a software tool or anything when in this everything's so new today as like, oh, but it can't do X, Y, and Z. But it's like, look at who's raising the most money, and inevitably those problems will be solved. Those are the companies that are definitely going to go the distance, and the money definitely talks. So yeah, when you see these kind of deals, invest some time into Claude, Anthropic, because inevitably, whether you're like getting your own personal subscription to it or the next company you work at has a company subscription, like it's going to be there and you're going to want to know how to use those tools. You're going to want to be familiar. It's the same thing. Like every single industry has kind of their own industry software and tools. And on your resume, you're like, yeah, I know how to use like bing, 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 like these 5 like very industry specific tools. Like I know in marketing, it's very common. There's like a handful of marketing tools you just got to know how to use, because when you get your next job, you're working at your next place, like they want you to do that. It's going to be the same thing with AI. They're like, how familiar are you with like X, Y, and Z AI company? Because we need you to be like really good at doing whatever is your next job position. So invest in the big ones, because eventually those are going to be what your companies are rolling out.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you're absolutely right. And again, and even if you're just what I think about all the time is like, how can you even sound smart? Like, it's very easy these days to kind of become like the AI champion in your office. I'm telling you, I work with companies all the time. I'll work with 200 people, and I'll be like, how many people are even using ChatGPT? And half will raise their hands. It's like, well, I wrote my mother's birthday card. It's really amazing if you just know kind of just generally how to use ChatGPT. Very easy. And if you know one other tool like Claude, you are going to sound like you got a PhD in machine learning to everybody around you. So do me a favor, lean into this. This is only, again, forget about sort of like how it's going to benefit your company for a second. Just think about how this is going to look just when you sort of expand your sort of base of knowledge just to a few of these tools. And Claude, I think, is definitely number one after ChatGPT.
Yep, 100% agree. Connor, this has been a fascinating episode. This has been a great episode, a great emergency podcast episode. Expect these. We might just pop up some breaking news right off the bat for you. Thank you so much for everyone that tuned into this episode today. I hope you got a ton of value out of it. If you could do us a massive favor and please, please leave us a review. If you leave us a review, it makes it much easier for us to get some incredible guests. And I'll tell you right now, Connor is lining up some absolutely incredible interviews that we're going to be having on the podcast very shortly from some people at some incredible companies and places doing some amazing stuff. So make sure to leave us a review. We really appreciate it. And I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.